Hello, kindergarten. Welcome to Bible Story Time. Today we will be reading about Jesus' last days. Hoy vamos a estar leyendo sobre los últimos días de Jesús. Maybe you've heard about them at church, or your parents have told you, or you have seen it in the television. So you might have an idea of what I am going to read about. All over the city of Jerusalem, God's people were preparing for an important feast called Passover. Passover is Pascua. Remember when God rescued his people from Egypt? Every year they shared a special meal together, remembering and celebrating what God had done for them. They didn't want to forget. So Jesus came back to Jerusalem to celebrate with his friends. As he entered the city, a big crowd welcomed Jesus like a king. They were starting to see who he really was, the king they had been waiting for, and what he had come to do, rescue them. But not everyone thought that Jesus was a king, and not everyone was excited about him. In fact, some important leaders were very angry that so many people were following Jesus. These men did not want people to listen to Jesus. They wanted everyone to listen to them and follow their rules. He isn't a king, they said, and we need to stop him. So they made a plan. Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, agreed to help them. In return, they gave him a bag of silver coins. On the night of the big feast, Jesus was with his disciples. Before the disciples could sit and eat, their feet needed to be washed. After walking through the dusty, dirty city streets, they were filthy. Washing dirty feet was a servant's job, and not a very nice one. But suddenly, Jesus knelt down and started to wash the disciples' feet. They were shocked. "Stop," they said. "You shouldn't do that. That's not your job." "But this is what it means to love one another," said Jesus. When we really, truly love each other, we serve one another. Jesus was surprising his disciples again. Jesus knew that he didn't have much time left with his friends. As they sat together, Jesus said to them, "I want you to love each other the way that I have loved you." He thanked God for their meal, and they shared it together. "When I am gone, remember me," Jesus told them, "especially when you share bread and wine like this." The disciples sat and listened to Jesus, but Judas left quietly and went out into the night alone. What do you think Judas was going to do? Everyone was listening to Jesus, eating with Jesus, and Judas walks out in silence into the night. What do you think he's going to do? Let's keep reading. Later that night, Jesus and some of his disciples went to a quiet place so that Jesus could pray. Jesus knew what was about to happen, and his heart was sad and afraid. So see, Jesus' heart was sad and afraid. He had emotions just like I do, just like you do. He wanted to talk to his Father, God. "Stay here and pray," he told his disciples. Jesus walked a short distance away and knelt down and prayed. When he came back to his friends, he found them asleep. He was sad that they hadn't stayed awake with him. "Wake up," he said. "It is time." At that moment, Judas found Jesus and his disciples in the garden. An angry crowd was with Judas. This is what the leaders had paid Judas to do to bring them to Jesus, away from the other people. They had come to arrest Jesus. The disciples tried to stop them, but Jesus told them not to. He knew that this was part of God's plan, and he refused to fight back. Instead, he let them take him away. The very next day, Jesus was led to a place where criminals were taken, even though he was God's perfect son who had never done anything wrong. There, just outside the city, he allowed himself to be punished like a criminal, and then he died, which might have been the end of the story, except that it wasn't. This was part of God's plan. Jesus' death would lead to new life for everyone. It would lead to restoration, which means making things right again. It looked like a terrible ending, but it was actually an unbelievable new beginning. So that was our story about Jesus' last days. So, as I said before, I think you have heard this story either in church, your parents told you, or you saw it in television. But this is something important. It's important to read and learn about what happened to Jesus, what Jesus was doing, what he was feeling the days before he was crucified. Right? And this story that we read ends with Jesus' crucifixion, but the next story, the next Bible story, we will listen about what happened 3 days after he was crucified. 3 days after he was put dead. I say it in quotation marks because he's alive. He rose from the dead. But we will learn more about that in our next Bible story video. So I really hope you enjoyed and learned a lot listening to this story. And I would like you to do this with your family. This is part of the Bible craft for this week. The Bible activity for this week, I mean. You are going to sit with your family and have dinner with your family, and I want you to retell this story to your parents, to your family. ¿Ok? Lo voy a decir en español ahora para que lo entiendan mejor. Después de haber visto este video sobre la historia de los últimos días de Jesús, yo quiero que como actividad de Biblia, que también está puesta en los slides, ¿verdad? Ustedes cenen con su familia y mientras están cenando o después de cenar, ustedes le cuenten esta historia a sus padres, a sus hermanos, a las personas que estén cenando con ustedes. Que le cuenten sobre los últimos días de Jesús. Y esa va a ser la actividad de Biblia de hoy. Entonces, espero que la hayan disfrutado, que hayan aprendido mucho. Y quiero ver cómo ustedes me cuentan cómo les fue en esa cena diciéndole a su familia sobre esta historia. Gracias por escuchar.